100 hours of testimony of Jeffrey Epstein. Wouldn't it be good for the FBI to interview Michael Wolff?
I'm not saying they haven't, I just don't know.
Has FBI subpoenaed the tapes that Michael Wolff has conducted of Jeffrey Epstein?
I don't know.
All right, so if you could provide us an answer, that would be terrific.
Sure.
Well, let me ask you this question then. Have you looked at all the photos in Epstein files?
I have looked at all the information that the investigators who investigated this case have provided to run out credible leads.
And in the Epstein files, was there
5 times in that hearing room, the director of the FBI was asked a direct question. 5 times, he did not give a direct answer. We counted, and by the end of this video, you will have seen every single one of them, in his own words. This is Kash Patel, testifying under oath, in a hearing that was supposed to be routine. It was not. Over the next few minutes, we're going to walk through exactly what was said, not the shouting, not the headlines built around it, just the words themselves and what they actually reveal. This hearing involved 2 congressmen, Ted Lieu of California and Daniel Goldman of New York, both pressing the FBI director on the same subject, the Epstein investigation and what the Bureau actually knows about it. To understand why this exchange landed the way it did, you need one piece of context most coverage skipped entirely. In July of last year, the Justice Department and the FBI jointly released a memo stating there was no client list and no evidence Epstein had blackmailed prominent individuals. That memo triggered immediate backlash from both sides of the aisle, and it never fully went away. It's the exact backdrop this hearing was walking straight into. Patel has led the FBI since earlier this year. Before that, he spent years as a media figure, publicly demanding the Epstein files be released in full, and that history matters, because it's the standard he was now being held to, by the very people who remembered him saying it. The first question Lieu asked was simple. Could the FBI subpoena Jeffrey Epstein's estate for material the public has never seen? Patel's answer suggested the estate wasn't obligated to comply, even with a subpoena, which understates the FBI's own legal authority, since a federal grand jury subpoena compels production regardless of whether the estate wants to cooperate. That's the first mark on our ledger. Lieu didn't let it pass quietly, and what he said next is the moment that actually put this hearing on the map. That exchange was only the warm-up. What came next involved a claim from journalist Michael Wolff, who has said publicly that he spent roughly 100 hours in recorded conversation with Jeffrey Epstein, across several years. In one televised interview, Wolff described Epstein showing him photographs pulled from a safe, some of which he said appeared to show Donald Trump at Epstein's Palm Beach home, with young women he described as being of uncertain age. To be precise about exactly what this is, it's one journalist's on-camera recollection, years after the fact, with no photographs ever released publicly, and no independent confirmation from any other source. It is also a claim made openly, on the record, by a named source with decades of reporting behind him, and that specific combination is what put Kash Patel on the spot next. Here's where it gets uncomfortable, because Patel didn't just answer the question about those photographs. He gave a reason for his answer, a reason with an expiration date he didn't seem to realize was already up.
All right. Are there any photos showing Donald Trump with girls of an uncertain age?
No.
How do you know that?
Because that information would have been brought to light by multiple administrations and FBI investigators over the course of the last 20 years.
Well, you know what? That's just not true, because no one knew about the creepy birthday message that Donald Trump wrote to Jeffrey Epstein until the Wall Street Journal disclosed it, and then all of a sudden, the Epstein estate provides it to Congress.
Well,
so certainly, you weren't there at the search. You don't know what Epstein may or may not have done with those photographs even prior to the search. Maybe someone has it. Maybe the Epstein estate has it.
You raise a great point.
So I'm going to ask you, have you...
That's a specific argument, not a vague denial. If something significant existed, 20 years of investigation, across multiple administrations, would already have surfaced it. It's a clean, testable claim, and testable claims can be broken by a single counterexample. Lieu had one ready. A birthday card, reportedly bearing Trump's name, that surfaced from Epstein's 50th birthday book, and stayed hidden for years, until the Wall Street Journal reported it. To be fair to the record here, Trump has publicly denied writing that letter, and has pursued legal action over the story, so its authenticity remains disputed. But notice something important. Liu's point never actually depended on whether the letter was real. It depended entirely on the sequence of events, because the letter surfaced from outside reporting, not from the FBI, decades into an investigation that Patel had just claimed would have caught something like this already. And Patel's response to that was not a rebuttal. It was a concession, live, on camera, from the one person in America whose entire job is knowing what his own agency has actually found. That's the second mark on our ledger, and it's arguably the most damaging one, because he handed it over himself. If that were the only moment like this in the hearing, it might be forgivable, a single stumble under pressure. It was not the only moment. Retention hook into clip 3, what Liu asked next didn't even require a counterexample. It just required Patel to answer a straightforward question about his own agency's basic paperwork, and what happened instead is the shortest, sharpest answer in this entire hearing.
I haven't, I just don't know.
Has FBI subpoenaed the tapes that Michael Wolff has conducted of Jeffrey Epstein?
I don't know.
All right, so if you could provide us an answer.
100 hours of recorded conversation with Jeffrey Epstein. The largest known private archive of its kind in existence, held by a journalist whose identity is public, whose contact information is not hidden, and whose material has already produced headlines. And under oath, the director of the FBI could not confirm whether his own agency had ever tried to obtain it. Not reviewed and rejected as irrelevant. Not ongoing and confidential for investigative reasons. Simply, I don't know. That's the third mark on our ledger, and this one deserves a second look, because of how low the bar actually was here. A subpoena for recordings already known to exist, held by a publicly identified journalist, is among the simplest moves a federal investigator can make. No secret warrants required. No foreign governments to negotiate with. No classified sourcing to protect. This isn't a national security question dressed up in caution, it's a basic operational one, and the honest answer, whichever direction it went, should have been sitting right there, ready to give. There were two more questions left in this exchange, and they involved a document everyone in that room already knew existed, because it had already been confirmed publicly, months earlier. Attorney General Pam Bondi had gone on the record, earlier that year, stating that a client list does in fact exist. That fact was not in dispute when Liu asked his next two questions, which is exactly what makes what happened next so revealing. Because once you've confirmed a list exists, there's only one way left to avoid answering questions about who's on it, and Patel was about to use it twice, back to back, on two very different names.
That exists. I just want to ask you a simple question. Is Prince Andrew on Epstein's client list?
The material related to Prince Andrew has been made public.
Is Prince Andrew on the client list?
We have released the index of names
All right,
that were in Jeffrey Epstein's.
Is Donald Trump on Epstein's client list?
The index has been released, and the index will speak for
So I'm
itself.
just going to say,
Not yes. Not no. A redirect to a document, twice, on two completely different names. That's the fourth and fifth marks on our ledger. 5 direct questions. 5 answers that were technically responses, without ever actually being answers, and here's exactly why that redirect strategy matters as much as it does. A document can't be cross-examined in a hearing room. It can't clarify itself in real time, and it can't be pressed on follow-up. So when Patel pointed to the index instead of answering, he wasn't just avoiding 2 specific names, he was avoiding the entire format of accountability that a live hearing is designed to create. This wasn't the only confrontation in that room that day, either. Representative Daniel Goldman, a former federal prosecutor, told Patel directly that he was hiding the Epstein files, calling it part of a cover-up. That's a serious allegation, coming from someone with real prosecutorial experience, not a casual jab, though it remains a claim under scrutiny rather than an established finding. Minutes later, the committee took an actual vote, not commentary, an actual recorded decision with real consequences attached to it. Representative Jamie Raskin moved to subpoena 4 major banks, JP Morgan, Bank of New York, Bank of America, and Deutsche Bank, over more than $1.5 billion in transactions those very banks had themselves flagged as suspicious and connected to Epstein. The Republican-controlled committee blocked that motion, by a single vote, 20-19. One vote is the entire margin between those transaction records staying private, and becoming part of the public record for good. During that same debate, Raskin played something that made the moment land even harder, old footage of Patel himself, from before he became director, publicly demanding these exact files be released in full. Representative Pramila Jayapal called the situation a giant cover-up, her characterization, made on the record, now permanently part of the congressional transcript. Here's the contradiction worth sitting with, because it's the real story underneath all 5 of these moments. The outsider who once demanded transparency louder than almost anyone in the room is now the insider giving the system's oldest, most practiced answer. I don't know. I'll accept your representation. The index will speak for itself. There's one pattern running underneath every piece of this story, and once you see it laid out, it's hard to unsee. The birthday letter didn't come from the FBI, it came from the Wall Street Journal and the estate. Wolff's account of the safe isn't an FBI finding, it's a journalist's private archive, built years before this testimony ever happened. Even the client list itself only exists on the public record because Congress and the Attorney General confirmed it, not because the Bureau volunteered it first. Every significant disclosure in this entire case has come from outside the FBI. Not from inside it. That's no longer a coincidence, it's a pattern with a 3-year track record, and it raises a question that goes well beyond one uncomfortable afternoon in a hearing room. The director of the FBI isn't required to have every fact memorized. But he is required to know what his own agency has and hasn't actually pursued, especially on the one case that defines his public credibility more than any other. When that answer keeps coming back as I don't know, it stops being a communication problem, and it becomes something closer to a command problem. There are 2 possible explanations here, and both of them are uncomfortable. Either the Bureau failed to chase the most obvious leads in the entire case, or its own director is too disconnected from the file to know whether it did. Neither one is reassuring, for an agency that is supposed to be the most capable investigative body in the country. This record doesn't disappear once the news cycle moves on to the next story. These exact exchanges will get replayed the next time Patel testifies, word for word, because congressional staff build future hearings using prior transcripts. The bank subpoena question isn't resolved either, since it failed by exactly 1 vote, which means a single committee member changing their position reopens the entire question overnight. Nobody needs to invent a smoking gun here. The congressional record does all the work on its own. A director who couldn't confirm his agency checked its most obvious lead. A director who conceded his own central argument mid-sentence, rather than defend it. A director who wouldn't say yes or no about 2 names, after already confirming the very list they'd supposedly be on. Those are facts, sitting on the permanent record, not speculation, and not spin. Whether that pattern reflects incompetence, caution, or something people are right to be more suspicious of, that's the exact question this hearing leaves wide open. It didn't answer that question. It just made it impossible to keep ignoring. If you want to keep following where this investigation actually stands, grounded in what was said under oath, and not the version built for outrage, subscribe to AVA Reports. Tell us in the comments which of these 5 moments stood out to you the most, and why, because we read every single one. We'll keep tracking this story as it develops. Thanks for watching.